welcome to this special episode of the Startup Central. I'm Nayantara Rai, working from home, as must all of you. Today, my guest is Kavin Bharti Mittal, who's also working from home and joining us via Zoom. Hi, Kavin. Good to see you safe and healthy. How's the lockdown been?
Likewise, and thanks for having me. Lockdown's been fascinating. I think as a company, as a business for us, we remote work all the time. So all those tools we invested in are being put to good use. This is one of those periods where it's unprecedented, and we're likely seeing sort of the 2-3 years worth of behaviors being crunched into 2-3 months, and this sort of period acting as a catalyst for new behaviors that may form that may stick on after the lockdown. Yeah. So it's definitely a fascinating time from a business point of view. Personally, I'm quite enjoying it. I got solitude in the quiet time. It's a very productive time for me personally. But I do hope also this ends sooner than later, because the impact on the economy in the world wide is quite large, and I hope that we sort of stick to that date that's come up in about 2-3 weeks.
But what this lockdown has done is not given us the option or the luxury to detox digitally. Perhaps never before have we been more connected digitally, which I guess for you and for the business you're in is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the fortunate things for a business like ours, and we call ourselves a bid space business, it's never been a better time to launch sort of digital products, because people are spending time at home, and home means online. And it's definitely, relatively speaking, tougher for the atoms-based businesses that have logistics, warehousing, and so on and so forth. But for us, it's been a pretty fantastic time from a business standpoint. Our numbers are up quite significantly, and we're quite excited to roll out this new project that we'll talk about today.
I'm just going to come to you about the project, but what I want to ask you is, and you touched upon it very briefly, do you think work from home is here to stay? Would you say entrepreneurs, professionals, your age group are now convinced that this is going to be the new normal, even when lockdown is over, when you do know that your employees don't necessarily have to be home, they're not jazzing off for a movie or for a date and all of that?
Yeah, we were initially, like everybody else, a little skeptical. But fortunately for us, we have the infrastructure in place to make this happen. And because everybody's locked down at their homes at the same time, I think that makes this significantly easier. Mm. And, the company's working pretty well. The teams are very productive. Of course, we have the added overhead of coordinating and so on and so forth. But when everybody's at home in one place and you have core hours that are built in, it's a lot easier. But no doubt, we're learning that this is possible. I won't be surprised if we take some learnings from the way we work today back into our everyday lives when we when this lockdown ends, and improve the way we work and be a bit more open-minded to what sort of work from home and remote working could look like.
Okay, now to talk about why we got you here, your new project, what you're doing with Hike. It's been a tough journey. It has its ups and downs. How are things looking like at the moment?
Yeah, look, I think if you're launching a startup, you have to have a stomach for it. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs. We're effectively challenging the status quo, what exists today. You have a vision for a better future and a better world, and you want to go sort of see it happen. And when we set all this up, when we launched the first product of Hike back in 2012, the world was very different. Mm. Data was expensive. Data was 2G. Smartphones had just arrived on the scene. And in 2017, because the world was changing so fast, we had to ask whether a super app would be the right means, the right user experience, and was it future-proof in a world where suddenly you had incredibly cheap 4G. Today India has $0.26 per gigabytes for 4G.
I know your dad doesn't like it, right?
Incredible, right? And China is about $9, and it's practically unlimited because it's 30 gigs a month. And second is, smartphones have become very good, even at the middle to low end, which means smartphones can handle 40-50 apps on their phones. So if data is cheap and smartphones can handle 40-50 apps, the smartphone itself has kind of become the super app. So why would you need a super app on a super app?
Yeah.
And plus, India, unlike China, is an open market. You are competing against the world. And that told us that the probability of a super app succeeding down the line would be very, very difficult. And we realized that after, despite raising a Series D, we had to pivot the business to something that was much more future-proof. And so that was the thinking behind why we shifted the entire strategy of the company. And the big question is, what are we up to now? And in the last couple of years, we have successfully pivoted the business from building a super app to unbundling the super app into multiple applications, because we really believe that in a world of cheap 4G and good smartphones, individual products can stand on their own 2 feet and can do a few things extremely well. And that's the way consumers want to sort of use products, unlike China, of course. And, under our noses, Nayantara, the world had changed. Suddenly you had all this technology at our fingertips that consumers were rapidly adopting.
Did you face an existential crisis, Kavin?
No, I think, on one hand, I can tell you that for a startup, it's existential every day. So I think you sign up for that. You have to sign up for that. Your back is pushed up against the wall every day and you sign up for it. I think that's part of the thrill in the adventure of building something new as well. But we had to think long and hard, about sort of where the business had to go, because despite spending 4.5 years building something magical and fantastic, suddenly you had to sort of think again.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for us, because we're a bit space business, we don't burn a lot of capital. Our capital is people and servers. It's not logistics, warehousing, and so on and so forth. So we can extend our runway quite long.
Yeah.
In March 2018, we cut the team from 390 people down to 120 people. We did that because we realized that if our core is under threat, we have to sort of pull back and figure out what the core is going to be, after which we can go scale up. So, it became clear to me that technology had evolved so much that now we could finally, in 2019, 2020, build brand new user experiences we couldn't build even, a year and a half ago. Very cheap 4G lets you push more bits per second to users. Low-end smartphones that have very high processing power let you do things on the smartphone you couldn't do before. Machine learning and AI has progressed tremendously, and you can do fantastic machine learning even at the device, even at the edge, because technology has gotten so far. Payments have become seamless. There's an early rise of crypto and blockchain. So the world today is very, very different than what it was when we founded Rai.
How have you pivoted? What's different? What's new? How is it keeping up with the times?
Yeah, so the blueprint, to simplify this, is we really believe, because of all the stuff I've talked about, because technology has advanced so much, you can build brand new things, because people are also adopting this technology very fast. We can see that they're far more comfortable online than offline, especially the next generation. We grew up playing in parks offline. That's where we made all our friends. But for the next generation, their parks are sitting online. They have no problem with meeting people online. And we believe the future of social is vertical communities, not these big 1 billion user products, because we don't spend time in one big product doing everything offline. We think that it's going to be these vertical communities that will be 10, 20, 50 million users in size, that could become fantastic products and businesses, because payments have become very seamless, thus enabling new business models to emerge. And so that's the blueprint. And the big question is, how is that translated into the products that we're building? So the super app had 3 pillars. We had messaging around stickers, we had gaming as game of the day, and we had news in content. And we decided not to unbundle, not to spin off news and content to a separate application, because of a couple of reasons. One is, we're not news people. When you have distribution on a super app, you can toss anything at the distribution and it takes off. But if you're taking off a pillar and spinning it up into a separate application, it has to stand on its own 2 feet. And so one, we were not that was not our sort of forte. Second, the business model in news is ads, and that's still evolving. It's still very early in India.
Yeah, tell us about it. We know about it.
And third is a lot of competition in that space, especially with some Chinese companies sitting with $1 billion of cash just acquiring customers. And you don't want those odds against you. So the probability of success in that space, we believe, for us as a company, was low. We really believe that the probability of success in both the other pillars, gaming and social, were relatively speaking higher, because the world had changed and you could build brand new things the world had not seen before. And that's where Hike Land comes into the picture, the new project we're working on. And the biggest question was, if we're unbundling the social messaging aspect of the super app into a separate application, surely we can't unbundle messaging, because messaging is done. That battle is over. And honestly, messaging is a decade-old user experience. It was built for 2G. We live in a world of very cheap 4G and good smartphones.
Yeah.
When we looked at our data in Hike, and first of all, Hike has always been a place for your close friends. So 3-4 people come on Hike and everybody else sits on the other applications.
Yeah.
And second, we noticed one thing in our data, which is people spend most of their time inside a Hike. The peak usage was between 10 to 12:30 at night. And that got us very curious. And so we went digging and we asked a bunch of users, about their behavior patterns. And we realized that it's not that they're messaging inside a Hike. It's that post 9:30 p.m., family time, dinner time is done. And they're trying to find ways to hang out with their friends.
Hmm.
They can't do that offline because one, India has an infrastructure challenge in tier 1 cities and beyond where there are not too many places to hang out offline. Second, society in India is also, social norms are still catching up. India's not had the liberalization the last 70, 80 years of the European West have had. And so, we're also a bit more conservative in the sense of how we can express ourselves offline freely. So people find avenues online to hang out with their friends. So people are not messaging and sending stickers and Hike. They're trying to hang out with their friends online when they can't hang out offline.
Hmm.
And we just asked ourselves, why are people hanging out in a messaging experience, in a 10-year-old messaging experience?
Hmm.
What if we built a new world, a new user experience, a magical and safe place online where you could hang out with your friends and do many more things online that you could do offline, a place where you could invest, own, earn, a place where relationships would be at the center of everything, and a place where your virtual self would be the center of this entire world.
So what is it? Video calls? Is it group chats? What is it?
It is none of the stuff that you are familiar with today.
So give us a sneak peek.
That's the point. It's important for us to innovate on the user experience because that's what customers feel in touch. So the best way to describe Hikeland is that we're building a virtual world. We're building a virtual world centered around your Hike emoji, the avatar that we launched about 3-4 months back.
Hmm.
And Hike emoji is doing really well. We had 3 million people create Hike emojis in just 4 months after launch. And we've done a lot of incredible things around machine learning where you can snap a photo of yourself. We sort of bring that sort of photo in, create an avatar of yourself. You can deck it out, and that was the first baby step towards the Hikeland project. And now we're actually rolling out Hikeland. As a matter of fact, as of last week, we began rolling it out, slowly to our user base. And it's literally a virtual world. It's nothing like you've ever seen before. A virtual world where great relationships can blossom, and a virtual world built around the idea of a virtual self. Because in the online world, you can be 70% you and 30% who you'd love to be. And so that is the vision. That's what we're building. And we're excited to roll that out. And you'll see the deep...
Like a dystopian future where I'm going to have basically a virtual ID and be whatever I want to be and hang out with whoever I want to hang out with.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that we've learned by watching the market, watching our users is that we sort of have this terminology inside of Hike, and we're still polishing it off, but we call it post-match and pre-match.
Hmm.
And post-match is if you've already met someone in real life and you have close friends, let's say a girlfriend or a boyfriend, you can bring that relationship onto Hike. And Hike becomes that really private, expressive place where you can hang out with your friends if you already have them in the offline world.
Okay.
That's one very big pillar of how we can enable great relationships to blossom.
This is like dating.
No, this is friends. You already have people bring them online. And then you have something called pre-match, which is people are very comfortable hanging out online. And they're very comfortable meeting like-minded people online. Because, the avenues online to meet people are not many. And also the market is a market where social norms are catching up. As a result, it is difficult to sort of meet like-minded people offline. So that's going to be a second pillar of Hikeland inside the virtual world. So we're going to have post-match and we're going to have pre-match.
Do you think sometimes, do you feel like, damn, I had this entire lockdown period and I'll have to go fully live when we're out of quarantine, when the lockdown is lifted?
We'll get it out before the lockdown ends. So we'll definitely get people this time and attention. But, also the true test of this is post-lockdown.
Yeah, post-COVID.
And I think some of the insights that we've had that are leading up to Hikeland get exaggerated for sure in the lockdown. but they have to sustain post the lockdown too. And given that, and we truly believe this, it's very possible that the lockdown has acted as a catalyst for what may have happened in 2-3 years. So people have been exposed to a lot of more online services. And I think that that's a great thing for all digital businesses going forward. So I think that the future of digital businesses as a result of this lockdown may be even brighter than before.
I know you said every day is a point of being existential. But do you think because of what you went through in 2018, 19, actually secured you and ring-fenced you during lockdown, and many startups are looking at the threat of maybe having to shut down forever? For example, you talked about that long runway. You did the whole cleaning up exercise before COVID. Is that a big advantage?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Our culture is one of innovation. We put the customer at the center. We dream big because we really believe, Nayantara, that imagination is the most potent force in this universe. But it has to be structured with the customer at the center. And many a times when you're innovating, you'll build things that may or may not work. And that built into your culture. And sometimes things have to change. So I think we've been pretty used to that for quite some time. And as we pivoted the business, it also allowed us to focus. And as a result, we're in a situation where things are pretty good.
And so what about the gaming aspect? You told me about the relationships, good relationships, these 2 great days, the virtual world, the virtual ID. You don't want to do news, but you want to still look at gaming?
Yeah, we're looking at gaming in multiple ways. One of the ways we have made a move in gaming is we invested in a company called Winzo last year. We led that round. And, the theme, the blueprint, as I called it, is, future social is these vertical niches. And in a more palatable sort of way, it's these sort of multiple places where people can hang out online. And, Highland is all about great relationships. And we really believe there's an opportunity to build an online arcade for the masses.
Okay.
And, if you walk into one of those arcades offline where you have the ice hockey and so on and so forth, those are great experiences. But they will never make it to the remotest parts of India because bits are cheaper than atoms. Atoms are very expensive. It costs infrastructure, rent, offline to sort of build these experiences. But in the online world, it's an app. And you can have the same emotional experience. So with Winzo, we're sort of building this online arcade for the masses where you walk into the application and very much like an arcade, you have these 20 casual games. And you have carom, you have stick cricket, you have all these fun games that you can play with other people and you can also wage against them.
Okay.
And so it's this weird new genre that's combining casual games with the idea of waging on skill-based games that's taken off like a rocket. And Winzo is sort of that online arcade for the masses where you can come and hang out with other people who want to come and challenge your skills on carom and so on and so forth.
I love air hockey, for example. So.
My favorite one is carom, although I keep getting beaten by some person who's become a complete expert and he takes all my money. But it's growing really fast. The numbers are looking pretty good, and it's built for India.
How are you going to monetize all of these businesses? Because that's going to be crucial, right? You've done a Series D funding. I'm sure a lot of the investors have a lot of questions to ask you. Yeah,
I think honestly, it's a good point. And if you look at some of my interviews ranging back to 2018, I kept saying in 2020, we will experiment with revenue. And we will. This is the year Hype will make revenue. And on the Winzo side, by the way, because you have the waging element, it's been generating revenue since 2019. So that pillar is already revenue generating and growing pretty fast. On the Highland side, you see us generate revenue this year, but I must also mention to you our blueprint on how we think about revenue. Because we're a bid space business, revenue to us is simply one more feature. So you could have a free sticker and a paid sticker. It's just another feature. And that's why I also use the phrase experimenting with revenue, because we also experiment with features. In simple terms, a virtual world needs a virtual economy.
Yeah.
So that's coming. And a virtual economy doesn't necessarily mean crypto, but it also does not mean crypto. And I'll leave you guys figuring out what that's going to be in a couple of
years. Why don't you figure it out for us? What does it mean?
Well, we know. We have something we're working on. Actually, a couple of things we're working on. We're excited about it, but we're also humble enough to know that it's important for us to listen to the market. we have these ideas, and customers must tell us that yes, we are liking this.
Okay.
We keep our cards close to our chest until we're excited about what we're doing, and we know that customers are going to love this. And I think one step at a time. Let's get Highland rolled out, and then we go from there.
The other thing I want to ask you was, right now during COVID, and the way you've seen the Indian government also react when it comes to China, what is it going to mean for High? Because suddenly some of the largest investors that you have in India when it comes to startup universe, like Tencent, as well as Alibaba, are in for a tough ride. What does it mean for entrepreneurs like you?
I think India's beginning to realize just the fundamental power of the internet as a factor of growing the economy itself, and how it's important to sort of be a little more strategic about that than not. And if you look at China, they've taken it completely the opposite way.
Yeah.
And from that, you had two $500 billion companies get spun up.
Mm.
And in India, for the most part, it's been the Western companies that have taken the entire land grab. And so I think that there is that realization, which is good for the country in some sense, because maybe there is an element brewing inside the minds of people who are running the country saying, you know what, we have to give sort of the Indian companies a fair shot. Second is, yes, this will make, it'll flag up any Chinese investments coming into Indian companies. It doesn't mean they won't come through, investments will stop. No, I mean, VC money will still flow in, but it'll just be under a bit more scrutiny. And I think that it's still early. We're not really sure what was passed and what exactly what that was.
Mm.
I think it's still early days, but clearly they're thinking about this, and I think that's a good thing. For companies like us, people like Tencent are, of course, quite a minority investor in the company. So, from our perspective, we're not too impacted. But let's wait and watch and see how this plays out.
Because there's been a big turmoil if you look at the startup universe, and it started maybe with WeWorks and SoftBanks. I think it's had its cascading impact, a domino impact that you've seen since the latter half of last year.
Yeah, look, I'm also a big believer in cycles.
Mm.
Cycles with respect to the economy, cycles in life, cycles in investments, cycles in, it's just everything is a cycle.
Mm.
And when you're deep in the cycle, if you're in the high of the cycle, you think the world is going to be like this forever. If you're in the low of the cycle, you think the world is going to be like this forever. You just have to zoom out a little bit and realize that you're in a cycle. And we've seen this. When Tiger invested in us, when Tencent invested in us, we've seen those cycles back and forth. And the best entrepreneurs know how to plan for that. You have to be planning for the best and the worst all the time.
Mm.
I think that's also what separates the best companies from the okay companies. I really believe the best products and best companies get built in times like these. I'm a big believer of that.
Kavin, before I come to an end of it, just tell us one thing. How do you stay calm? Because, look what you've gone through. You've had to downsize your team. You're saying that, it's every day you worry about existence and all of that. You've done Series D raising. You have to do all of that. You have to innovate. You have to come with a brand new product. How do you stay calm? That's the big message, that you could give to anyone tuning in at the moment.
That's a really good question. And I think I just want to rephrase something that I said. It's not about, existential every day in the sense that, what's going to happen to us tomorrow, but it's more like existential of how do we make something insanely, incredibly awesome for the customer? That's where the mind is. So we channel all that energy towards building something fantastic for the customer. I think that's number one. Number two is, it's not about you. This is not about me. This is not about somebody on my team. It's not about us. Yeah. It's about the impact we can bring into this world that's very, very unique. What can we as a team create that's so unique and magical that customers absolutely love it? Yeah. So you have to shift your mindset from it being all about you to it being all about the customer and how can we serve the customer. That's number two. So you got to shift the energy completely away from yourself to the customer. And third is, I feel like, and I've gone through this myself, because you had so many, we've had this sort of one up and down. When you're younger, Nayantara, you're kind of trained and sort of bred in a way to think outside of yourself. Everything's about competition. Everything's about, what other people think of you. And as a result, it drives most people to seek validation and fame. And when I was 28, 29, Hike became a $1 billion company. And fortunately for me and the team, we actually got a lot of that pretty early on. And we realized that that's not the goal. It's not the goal at all. All of these things that you start zooming out and see things very objectively. And it's not about you, it's about the customer. Focus on sort of what makes you unique, because that's the game you can always win. And third is, just you sort of have to keep in mind that, you have to keep in mind the vehicle that you're playing inside. If you want to build a company and you're in the business vehicle, you have to understand the rules, right? And you have to master the rules. And, and all of this insight comes from making sure, I personally carve out a pretty meaningful part of my day and week just for introspection and reflection. At least half an hour, 45 minutes every day I meditate. I think, you know this. And every second Sunday, I personally, I sit in silence for about 3-4 hours. And I do. And I've come to, it's a very hard habit to build, especially in today's day and age where you have so much distraction and so many instant gratification distractions that are chasing after you. But you have to cultivate a way to disconnect from the world around you. And if you can do that, then you're able to look at the world around you quite objectively. And that's a very powerful skill to have.
Tell me something. You said you were a $1 billion company. You got in pretty early on. You got the kind of revenue you did. What next? Is it still a $1 billion company?
Yes, until proven otherwise.
Because that's a big thing, right? You were written so much about how it's not a $1 billion company.
Oh, no. Never said that. Unless proven otherwise. Unless proven otherwise.
With that, Kavin, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out and also for being very candid and joining us here on this edition of Startup Central. Here's wishing you and the entire team at Hike all the very best. Can't wait to try out Hike Land.
Thanks a lot for having me. Cheers.